I am Sherry, an alcoholic. I have been through this process with 2 Big Book Step Study sponsors. A loving God, have made all of my amends, practice 10, 11, and 12 to the best of my willingness, not to the best of my ability, because I could certainly do more on a daily basis, but to the best of my willingness on a daily basis. I came into Big Book Step Study about 10 years ago, right about 10 years ago. And, the attraction to Big Book Step Study was, I had been very friendly with some people in AA who had come through this process, come to find this process, and saw them really transform. I feel like that's such a cliche word we use, but I can't think of any other word for it. Like, this one person in particular that I was good friends with, like, she just really transformed, and it was amazing. So I didn't necessarily think, I had done a lot of step work through through my AA life. I had been sober 20 years at that point, and I had done it a lot of different ways, and I also wasn't in this low in my life at this point 10 years ago where I felt like I needed to do this work again. But I was so impressed with the transformation and this person that I knew that I wanted to come check it out and see what it was all about. So I came with her. It was actually here. This was my first meeting here at St. Stephen's, and it was about 10 years ago. I was 20 years sober, and I had no idea what to even expect. And the meeting was on sex conduct, and I just remember I was bug-eyed, my eyes looked like the front of a Volkswagen. I was I was oh my God. And then, but what happened was, through the meeting, through the sharing, I just remember I started bawling. I was crying, not profusely, where I was drawing all this attention to myself, but I just remember I had tears, and it was just I'm almost emotional just talking about it now. It was just being in a room where you could just hear this raw emotion. It was just, and honesty, it was just so profound to me. And this was my first day sitting in a Big Book meeting, and so anyways, I knew at that point, there's something here for me, and so she had, and I wanted to do the work. I wasn't even entirely clear about what the work was, to be really honest with you. I didn't know anything about turnarounds, I didn't know, but I knew there was something in this room. There's something in this room. There was something that the people in this room had. It was kind of if we all remember the first day we got sober and we're sitting in an AA meeting and we felt that hope, and we felt like we were with like-minded people. It was, that's exactly how I felt. I'm I gotta do this work. I want to do it the way it's laid out in the Big Book, the way those first 100 drunks, wrote this process the way it's supposed to be. So so she said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll get you started. You need to find a sponsor, but we'll start reading together, and I'll get you started. I'll kind of help launch you, because at that point I was kind of ready. So so she did, and then I got through the 3rd step prayer with her. Had just started to get the instructions about how to write my resentments. And at that point I found another sponsor, because she was also a very good friend of mine. I didn't want to go through the work with her. Because quite frankly, she's probably in my book somewhere too, I'm sure. Anyway, so I found a sponsor, and that was just, and I'll just say this about the sponsor. So about the sponsorship aspect of it before I get into this 8 and 9. So I had no idea what to do. I was also going to the Wednesday night meeting, and for some reason, I think this Wednesday night meeting was actually, it wasn't at Whitmarsh and Leeds. It was even before that. I think it was at St. George's, Coburn Ave. So I'm going there, I walk into this Wednesday night meeting, and, there's somebody I work with there, you know, like, that I was kind of good friends with her at work, like, pretty good friends with her at work. But I had no idea she was in this program, let alone had done this process. She doesn't even live up here, she lives in Upton. So I was like, oh my God. So anyways, my point is I'm talking to her after the meeting, and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for a sponsor, blah, 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 blah. So she kind of makes a suggestion, and it turns out, she talks to that person, then I reach out to that person, I end up with a sponsor. So, that was like the most important thing I had to do. Like, you can't do this work alone. You cannot do this work alone. You can sit in these meetings all day long. You can even hear how it works and how you write, but you cannot do this work alone. I started the writing with this sponsor that I have, that I still have today, 10 years later, and she was pretty clear, right? So now remember, I had already been in AA a long time, so I'm sponsoring all these women, and I think I'm all that in a bag of chips. She says to me, you need to give up all your sponsees, and I'm like, what? I mean, I really had a hard time, like, at first with this, right? And she said, you need to commit to going to at least 2 Big Book Step Study meetings a week, and I'm like, oh God, here we go, right? And you need to write every single day, and so these are all the things that probably everybody else gets, right? So, but I did struggle a little bit, and then I just, I just took her suggestions, and it was very humbling for me to do that, but I had to do that because I had to recognize, like, especially with the sponsees, like, I had nothing to offer these people right now. Couldn't bring them through the work, like, I had nothing to offer them, and I'm like, well, but we go to meetings together, we drive together, I pick them up, I might do this, and she's like, yeah, you can do all that, but you don't have to be their sponsor, so, okay. So I did that. So I took her advice. I wrote every single day, about an hour a day, even on the weekends, even on vacations. To be honest, like, I didn't have too many vacations because from start to finish, I finished my writing in 4 months. I was determined. I wasn't going to screw around. I was like always like a good scholar. Like, I was like, so that's like, I was going to do it the right way. I hear people talk about, well, I had to be with a blue pen, and it had to be like, I don't know what color pen I have. I don't really care. But, it was a 5-subject notebook. I did have to write my resentments on the left, and I had my turnarounds on the right, and I had 2 per page, so I had some general instructions, but I wrote every day, and she also wanted to see my book every single week, whether it was here or at the Wednesday night meeting I go to. So I knew I had to write every day anyways, because otherwise it was going to be obvious I wasn't writing. So, like, having to show your book, kind of holds you accountable. So I did that, and I got through the writing, and then we went on to the 5th step, which was also another, like, amazing experience, and it wasn't how I, like, thought it should go, because I only knew, like, from my past how 5th steps go, but it went really, really well. She came to my house every Tuesday night, and I read for 2 hours, and she just sat there and she just listened to me. There was no incense, there was no coffee, there was none of, it was like, she came over at 6 p.m. Tuesday nights, and we read for 2 hours, I read. And it was exhausting, and I'm glad that I took her suggestions, because, I would have done it the marathon way and just kind of tried to bang it out over a weekend or something, and, after reading for 2 hours, man, like, I was amazed at, like, how exhausted you are doing that. So it was good for me to, again, just shut up. Like they say in old-fashioned AA, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth. Like, that's what I did. I just took all the suggestions, and then, I went home, I spent my hour with God, we read the first 5 proposals, and then 6 and 7, and then bringing me now to 8 and 9. So then we did the instructions for 8 and 9, for 8, and she told me to make a list, and then to kind of categorize my list of people that I felt that I had made a direct harm to, or I inflicted direct harm on. So I had to really think about that. Because sometimes you can think you caused direct harm, like, you might think you hurt somebody's feelings because maybe you did something that you had to do to take care of yourself, right? That's not direct harm, right? So, like, there was just a lot of things, that I needed her help to kind of tease that out. I had a lot of people on the list, like you know, I'll like, let's say, you know, like the family of an ex-boyfriend. Like I felt like it was a direct harm because I broke up with him, so they were hurt. Like it was just like all messed up around that. But she helped me to really kind of, you know, weed out all those where there wasn't a direct harm. And so now I have my list and I categorize it. So I start to put the names in, you know, ready, 4 categories: ready and willing, you know, ready and not willing, which kind of meant, you know, I'm not really willing to go pound the pavement looking for those people, but if they cross my path, I'm willing to make those amends, you know. So, you know, that would just mean I need to keep praying on that. And then the 3rd category was financial, and the 4th one was never. So I was to put all the names kind of in these different categories or columns. And I did that. I had nobody in the never column. I had, you know, a few in the financial, and I had, you know, probably half and half almost in the ready and willing and ready and not willing. And it was, you know, it was hard to look at this list because, you know, I got sober at a young age. I got sober at 21, and I'm doing this work now at 41. So it was hard for me to look and see all this, you know, damage that I had caused, mostly in sobriety. Like, I couldn't even friggin' blame the alcohol on it, you know, and that really kind of sucked, you know. That was like, it was just really like humbling, you know, like, damn it. Like, I just felt like I wasted 20 years in sobriety, and I hadn't really changed the person I brought into the halls. Like, I was like, all this shit I did while I was sober. I was like, I had to remember that I wasn't recovered. Like, I wasn't in, like, I thought I was in recovery. It wasn't like I was sober and I was just screwing around with my program and I didn't care. I mean, I truly did, you know, do everything I felt like I should have been doing in AA. I mean, I really did. I did service and I went on commitments. Like, you know, I sponsored people. I was sponsored. You know, I mean, I did really care about my recovery in AA before I came to Big Book, you know. You know, and I was very active in AA, but, you know, I just never did the work this way. So I never got real deep into, you know, my character defects and my relationships with others and what makes me tick. I just never really got that deep, that's all, you know. But it was just still humbling for me to see that a lot of this damage, a lot of these amends I was going to have to make, you know, I was making, you know, I had to make because of things that I did in sobriety. And the worst part was, you know, I couldn't go out and make amends to people and say, you know, because I'm sober today, and because I'd already been sober 20 years, you know, so like couldn't even like, you know, I was trying to find the easier, softer way to do this friggin' work, like. It just wasn't right. Like, so then I, you know, so now it's time for step 9, and I have to say, like, I was a little nervous to do step 9, and I was nervous to do it just because, to be honest, I didn't want to speak. I remember saying to my sponsor, I'm afraid to speak now. Like, you know, here I was coming from, you know, I would always speak, and then I come in here, and everybody sounds so profound after they've been through the work, and I'm like, I'm never going to sound like that. Like, I was literally scared to speak. When I came into this process, the one thing I loved was when they said, if you haven't, and we say it at every meeting, if you have not been through the work this way, this very particular way, you know, we humbly ask that you just listen. You know, and it's really important, you know, for me to even like hear that again, right? I loved that because I knew at that point, like, maybe I'd done this work other ways, but not this way, and I needed to just listen. And I got so used to just listening that I loved it. And what helped me about just shutting my mouth and listening when I hadn't done this work was the fact that I wasn't sitting in my head going, what am I going to say? 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 Is it going to get to me? I wasn't doing any of that, right? Because I couldn't speak anyways. I was just here to listen. So, I know I kind of got off on a tangent on that, but I guess for some reason I was meant to bring it up again. So that was part of what scared me about, like, I was told after I made 3 amends that I would, I need to start sharing, and I was kind of stalling at first, and I remember that because I was just afraid to share. But my sponsor said, look, we all feel like we're never going to sound like the next person, and, that you have your story, and, God works through you, and, you don't have to worry about that. So, I started my amends, and, and that was really humbling. I was told, or it was suggested that to make the amends, I shouldn't just blindside people. I don't want to say this like a script, but there is like things that you kind of don't do, and there's things that you should do, so I don't blindside somebody. I don't do something because it's convenient for me. I do need to think about the other person. I do need to ask them if I can make time with them to make an amends. I need to do that. Why? Because maybe they're not ready, and I actually learned that because I had people in my life who weren't ready and told me that they asked me if I could wait. So, I learned that I had to do that, and I also learned that, and even, we talk about it, it's here in the book, I also needed to think about where other people were, if I knew where they were in their life at a given moment, right? Like, maybe, somebody's going through this traumatic situation or a divorce or something. Maybe I don't need to kind of bring this stuff in right now into their life. So if I knew that, I needed to just think about that, and then I could do that maybe later. So I did start my amends, and one of the first ones was a financial amends, and that wasn't easy, so I was, in high school, and I worked someplace under the table, and it was a dry cleaners, and it was cash business, and I had stolen money from them, and I wasn't even old enough to work. I was like 15, and I had stolen money from them, and these 2 partners that own the business, blah, blah, blah. So I had to seek them out, and they knew I stole the money because back when this happened, my parents busted me. The owners were friends with my father, which made the whole thing worse. My father went down and handed the keys to them and said, my daughter's been stealing money and she's no longer going to go and work here. Jesus. So these were like one of the first ones I did. So I sought them both out and met with them both individually. And I'm not kidding when I say they're like 85 now. Right? Or 10 years ago when I did this. But I called each of them. They were very gracious. I met with each one of them at their house separately. Their wives were with them. I go into the living room. It almost happened the exact same way for both of them. And I go, and the business is no longer, but they're still friends, so I explained. I said, I came into AA a long time ago, and through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're taught to kind of go back into our past, clean up the wreckage of our past. This is something, I was honest, I said, this is something that has been bothering me, I'm emotional talking about it. This is something that's been bothering me since I was 15 years old. Never forgot it. One of those things since I was 15 years old, I never forgot it. And so I was just really just vulnerable. And I said, I need to repay you. And, so anyways, I did that with both of them. Of course, neither one of them had wanted me to repay them, of course, right? And I said, but this isn't my money to keep. I'd be glad to give it to you, to a charity of your choice, but I need to do this. I need to do this for you. This is your money. This isn't my money. So they both agreed that I could give them each a gift certificate to a restaurant of their choosing so they could go together and take their wives out together. So it was really the cutest thing. So that was one of my financial amends, and it went really well. I had some others where the companies or the people were no longer around, and I donated money to the PIP shelter or things. I did some things like that. And then I had, some, I'm not going to go into all of them, but I had a few others. I had some that were pretty tough. Right? My mother's been through this process. She'd been through this process when I was at this point now, I think, where I was going to make amends. She wasn't actually ready. Oh, that's what it was. She hadn't finished the process yet. She wasn't ready. I needed to wait. So I ended up doing it after she went through the work. I also had to ask people, is there anything after I make my amends, is there anything I might have left out? Oh, God, that wasn't easy either. Because there's always somebody who's gonna tell you there was. And I did. I had a couple of people say that what I had done was very hurtful. I had to make amends to a good friend of mine just for withdrawing out of the relationship. Like I literally fell off the face of the earth. Right? It was like I vaporized just out of nowhere. And she doesn't know what the heck, so whatever. I make amends to that. And I asked her, is there anything I left out? Is there anything you'd like to say? And she kept it really short and sweet, but it was really hard for me to hear. But she did tell me how hurtful that was to her. And that she didn't know why. She always thought she did something wrong. And this was really important for me. I needed to hear this stuff. Like I needed to feel, humbled by that behavior. I needed to feel that. So, because, the more I feel that, the less I'm ever going to want to do that again, because it's like right here. Like I know today how that makes people feel. So anyways, I did get through that work. I did finish all of my amends. And that, kind of brings me to where I am today. So, all I'll really say about this process is that, first of all, it was transformative for me. It was a spiritual experience for me. I never had like this spiritual awakening going through this. It was a long process for me to get better. But because of this work, because I continue to stay in this work with the 10 steps and other things and working with others, still working with my sponsor, still talking to my sponsor every single week on the phone, not just like as a passerby at a meeting. We have a dedicated call that we do every week. Because I still do these things, this work is like right in front of me at all times. So, because I'm still gonna mess up, I'm still gonna have resentments, I'm still gonna, inadvertently hurt people. But by doing this work and just staying close to it, it's just right there on my conscience all the time. I'm quicker to clean up my act. I'm quicker to make amends. I'm quicker to just kind of reconcile some of those things. But it does take work. And, I think for me to get it done as quick as I did was good for me, because I just needed to keep moving. I couldn't have any more excuses to drag the work out. I just needed to do it. So for that, I'm grateful to be here. Wherever you are in your work, just keep working at it. We'd love to hear from you. We need more speakers. Thank you.